Are you tired of the same old relationship patterns repeating themselves? You know, the ones where you attract the wrong partners or find yourself stuck in frustrating cycles of disconnection and heartache? You are not alone. Many women in midlife crave deep, fulfilling relationships, but find themselves struggling to create them. Maybe you've read all the relationship advice books, you've tried therapy, you've even explored online dating, but you still haven't found the lasting love you desire. But what if the missing piece isn't about finding the right person, but about changing your own mindset around relationships? My guest today, Joelle Lydon, a heart coach and author, discovered that her own limiting beliefs about men were sabotaging her chances of finding love. She embarked on a unique and courageous journey, a men's project, to challenge her assumptions and rewire her relationship paradigms. Through this process, Joelle uncovered a surprising truth about the nature of love and connection, a truth that transformed her own life and now helps her guide others to create the relationships they've always dreamed of. Stay tuned and hear Joelle's inspiring story to discover how you can break free from frustrating cycles and invite lasting love into your life.
Welcome to Making Change with Your Money, a podcast that highlights the stories and strategies of women who experienced a big life transition and overcame challenges as they redefined financial success for themselves. Now here's your host, certified financial planner, Laura Rotter.
Welcome, Joelle, to the Making Change with Your Money podcast.
Thank you for inviting me. Such a pleasure and an honor to be here.
I'm excited to see where our conversation takes us.
Yeah.
We'll start, as I always do, with the question, Joelle, what was money like in your family growing up?
I love this question because through the work that I do, money and love are not so far away from one another, actually. The way that you approach love is usually the way that you approach money. And so that places where there's disconnection or disconnect is in money, you will usually find parallels in relationship as well. So I love that question. For me, money was in my family of origin, money was a dirty word. We didn't talk about money. And so my father was English. He grew up in obviously England, but he was there during the Blitz and went to boarding school.
Wow.
And so his experience of money was based on his not having because of war, because his father was also a gambler and a drinker and probably bipolar. We haven't quite determined that piece. But he was off in boarding school. He went from age 8 to age 18, and then he went to Oxford. But during that time that he was in boarding school, he'd come home on home leave, and sometimes he'd come back to a house, and sometimes he'd come home to an apartment. So it was never from like year to, there was just like never any sort of certainty around money for him. So for him, money was a very elusive thing. For my mother, it was very similar storyline, but just different, right? So she's American. My grandfather was also not very reliable provider. Sometimes had money, sometimes did not. Also alcoholism going on, gambling, playing, having fun, not necessarily providing for the family. So the two of them had this sort of common storyline of there's never enough. You can't depend upon it. And it can go in an instant.
Wow.
And so that was the story that I grew up with, primarily as a primary storyline in my family of origin.
So a scarcity storyline.
A scarcity storyline. But the most interesting piece is that when my father, so he worked for the United Nations, he ended up working for the United Nations. We lived in Chile from 1968 to 1974. So during the time of the coup d'etat and the bombing of the equivalent of the White House in Santiago. And the military takeover. We were there in that country during that time. But when we first moved there, he was being paid in dollars. So that meant he was positioned like very differently from other people. So all of a sudden he had all of this income. And so there's a contrast between the not enough mindset that we had with a lots and abundant, and look at and all the ways that we can have money and all the spending that we can do. So there was this sort of, yeah, it had my father dreaming big, but
Yeah.
then being scared, and dreaming big and being scared. So that was just, it's very like a very interesting place and story in my family.
Thanks for sharing that, Joelle. So, how do you think that yin yang, if you will, around money impacted you?
For sure, the dream big and not enough is has definitely impacted me. Like my father, I'm a very big dreamer.
I
Like my
love that.
mother, I'm a very big creative. So she was an artist.
Uh,
So I there's a both end, right? So there the apples never fall from the tree, far away from the tree. We always embody aspects of the storyline. Whatever storyline is part of our matriarchal or patriarchal lineage, we embody until we make a decision to release in whichever way we can the story that no longer serves, and begin to beat the drum of something very different. So how it really worked out for me is that this goes back to the relationship work that I do, is that when I left my family of origin, I was really positioned and well set up to marry my first husband, who had lots of money, came from a family with lots of money. However, he was also very abusive. So that so in essence, I gave all agency, responsibility, sovereignty around money issues to him. Because in my mindset was like, men do the money, women do not. So even though it makes sense that I have my own job, I'm making my own income. He was studying to be a lawyer. So that storyline presented itself in my relationship with my ex-husband. And then later on, after I left my ex-husband and actually took back some of that power with my own money, tracking it, really being able to, in a span of a year, save enough money to put a down payment on a house so I could move into my
That's
own home,
impressive.
right? And then getting into another relationship, and then to hand that over to a man again. It was just like, whoa, Nelly, what's going on here, Joelle? You need to
Right.
really, really find out, like, why is it that you keep handing over your power in regards to money to a man? And how is it that you can begin to take that back for yourself? So I can happily say we're in a very different position now.
Yay.
Yay.
So, Joelle, you described the time that your family spent in Chile. Did you then come back to the States, and what was your personal progression professionally?
So we didn't come back to the States. We actually ended up in Geneva, Switzerland. And
Ah,
that's where they lived until they decided they graduated, as I like to say it. And so my progression from my family of origin is that actually when I became a teenager and a bit of a troublemaker, because I was now bringing attention to the family. So as his father was, my father was also an alcoholic. And then as my grandfather also possibly had bipolar disorder, my father definitely did. So there were lots of things happening in my family of origin and he was in a position where he's dealing with ambassadors and politico, like all kinds of very important people. And I was being a teenager, drawing all kinds of attention to the family. So at 16, I was sent away. So I was sent to this country to live with my aunt. So as I shared earlier, my mother was American. And so from here, I got my education here in New York and went on to become a school teacher. So I taught as a school teacher for 32 years, K
wow.
through actually postgraduate school. So I taught, yeah, K through 12 in the public school system, but I was also an adjunct professor teaching undergrads and grads as well. And so I did that for a number of years. And then partway through, in a teacher center course, that I was taking after they usually had these teacher center courses that you took after you had a whole year of teaching. You're supposed to recuperate.
Yeah.
Invited a woman to speak to the teachers that were there, and she spoke to us about being a life coach. This was probably back in 2007.
Oh,
And I
before
remember
everybody was a
listening
life
to
coach.
her before it was like a thing. And I remember listening to her speak, and I like every hair on my body stood on end. And she had my rapt attention. I'm like, I don't know what you're talking about, lady, but this is something that I'm going to end up doing. I don't know what it is. I don't know what it looks like. I don't know how you get certified in it, but I'm going to do it. So probably around 2007, 2008, I'd already gone through an expressive arts therapy training certification. I decided to go into a coaching training
Can
and
I
then
just stop
became
you there, Joelle? I'm curious what you know about yourself and you knew about yourself at the time that sort of made this coaching idea resonate with you. Because I know you and you've already self-expressed as a creative. So what about the coaching drew you in?
there was no rhyme or reason to it. It was one of these, and I'm sure people have had these situations happen to them in different times of their life where they get a nudge or an impulse or an intuitive hit, or you want to call a gut feeling that something is meant to be acted on. And then oftentimes people will choose not to. And then it comes and bangs them on the head a couple of times more. And sometimes it's a big old whack over the head until change happens. For
Yes.
me, it didn't take any whacks over the head. I knew it instantly. Like my whole body responded instantly in that moment. And so I just trusted that was the way for me to go. There was no question, there was no doubt, there was no second guessing, there was no analysis paralysis, nothing around that. It was just like, I'm going to do this. I don't know what it is, but I'm going to do it. I don't know how, but it's going to happen. And it was just like, it was that clear.
Wow. Thank you. Go on. I'm sorry I interrupted you. How you said you were going to then take a coaching program.
I did end up going through a certification program. It was a 2-year program it was an accredited program through the International Coaching Federation of Coaches. And I started to work with women on career transition work. At that time, I was not feeling particularly happy as a teacher and was looking to transition out. I didn't have the courage the means to. I had gone through divorce. I was like, I had my son. I had to like take care of him, take care of me, but I wanted to not teach anymore. So I thought that could be a way out for me. If I helped other women, maybe they could show me how to do it, right? If I was supporting them. And then as life would have it, I got my heart broken for like the last time. So that second relationship that I spoke of when I handed my hand over my money purse strings over the second time, and I was aware of that. That was like a really devastating moment, a deep, dark night of the soul. We had been together for 8 years, just past the marriage, past the divorce, past everything. We'd been together for 8 years. We blended our families. We got the dog. We got the house, like the whole thing, and it just fell completely apart. And I realized at the end of that relationship that in fact, when I got over the heart and I'm never going to date again, I'm never going to be in a relationship again, I realized there's this piece in me that actually doesn't believe that I can be held and loved by a man because I actually don't trust them. I actually don't believe that they can provide for me. So are you seeing the storyline, the matriarchal and the patriarchal storyline that the fathers don't provide, not necessarily financially, but also emotionally. So that thread was starting to come through and really clear for me at that point. And I recognized that I was actually a card carrying member of the Men Are Pigs Club.
Oh, God.
Because although I wanted to be in relationship with them, I didn't trust them. I didn't believe in them. I didn't think that they had my back or my self-interest. And so when I recognized that I was the common denominator in all of the failed relationships that I'd had, I knew that I had to change my own mind about men. And so that actually was the beginning, that awareness was the beginning of a change in course of my coaching business.
Joe, I'm curious, did you seek help that had you recognize the common denominator? It was just through maturity. What came up?
A number of factors. So yes, I did. At that time, I was in the School of Womenly Arts, Mama Gina's work. I had enrolled in her school. I was actually in that school for about 10 years. And it was through that community and through my work with Regina and the support of the community that I was able to then do what I end up calling the Men's Project. It was kind of like the Men Are Pigs Project, but I enlisted the support of the women that I was in community with and support. And I essentially went out to prove myself wrong around men. One of the things that Regina has do as part of our training is that we would be in an audience as part of the audience, right? And she would bring men, or she would invite women to bring their men in. And they would sit on the stage, and then we could ask any questions we wanted of the men that were on stage. The first time I went through that experience, I thought, they got paid. Men aren't really this nice. Men aren't really this way. And then when I recognized, wow, maybe they are, maybe what's in here is wrong and what's on that stage is the truth, I went out to prove it to myself. So created a project where I would date as many men as possible to change my mind about them. But the only way that I would go out with them is if they would know that, one, I'm not interested in a relationship right now because I don't think highly of you lot. What I'm looking for you is to get some help in changing my mind about you. And are you in? Can you help me change my mind about you? So there were lots of guys who were they ran for the hills. They thought I was very bizarre. They also were looking for commitment, which I was not offering. But the men who said yes to play really were wonderful. So over the course of it ended up about a year of dating lots and lots of different men. I tracked my data. I like what worked, what didn't work. And then I really created like a scientific project around this dating of men so I could change my mind about them. And what I discovered was like something that really, it was like a teeny little thing that really surprised me because I thought I was looking for the one. And it turned out that every man that I dated, whether he was a construction worker or a professor at the Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute, like whatever, a lawyer, whatever, they each and every one of them had aspects of the one that I was looking for. So that meant it was like all of a sudden, like, what? I mean, each one of them has potential. So that completely changed my mind about men. And in the process, I met my now husband.
Oh.
And that's how I began. That was my first client. And that's how I really changed the focus of my work from career coaching into the relationship coaching. Of course, got trainings and all kinds of things like that, started teaching workshops, and now I'm doing one-on-one work. And I've written a book. So I'm just really thrilled to be at this place supporting both men and women and couples, which is my most recent adventure, playing with couples to really transform their relationships.
What a great story, Joelle. Thank you so much for sharing it. I'm curious if the journey you went on changed your relationship with your father in any way.
I'm so glad you brought that up. It did. It did. It really did. I get teary thinking about it. For the majority of my life, we had a very tense relationship, he and I. And there were many moments in my relationship with him and with my mother where I would go periods of time, I don't know, 10 years, without actually talking to them. And it was easy and convenient because there's an ocean between us, right? So there were these like long stretches of time where I would not communicate with them. But then probably in 2018-ish, I got a call from my brother who said, Mommy and Daddy are like, they're starting to really show their age. I just wanted to let you know. And I had a moment where I thought, Joelle, you can carry on with a dance that you've done of stay away, I'll try to get close, stay away, I'll try to get close. That piece You can keep doing that and then they'll die and then you'll regret not having done anything about it. Or you can actually do something about it. So probably, I want to say maybe it was 2018. I decided I'm going to just call every Sunday to say
Wow.
hello.
It's a big change.
And so I started to call every Sunday. I didn't tell them why. I didn't tell them what I was up to. I just started to call. And then fast forward into 2022 when my parents' health was really declining. I went over back and forth, taking them out of their home, placing them into a care facility. And then my father deciding he was like done with this whole gig. So very quickly. So in that time period, I stayed with them probably about 5 months. I was like schlepping back and forth to, and in that time period, we made peace in a way that I never could have thought possible. For starters, I showed up in that relationship as me. I didn't, I'm not the daughter. I am the daughter, but I just didn't show up in that you're the parent, I'm the child, that infantilized like position. It was like, I'm here and I'm here to be a service of you and support you in this next phase of your transition plan. And whatever your wishes are, to the best of my ability, I will support and follow those plans to the best of my ability, so long as it has your best interest in mind. And so that's what I did. I was able to show up. And then the day that my father died, my husband and my son and I had actually gone to France, had arrived on a Sunday because we were going to go and empty out the house and clean things up. And we were in Paris, and I got a call from my brother saying, because we arrived at 5 in the morning, 4 o'clock in the afternoon, I got a call from my brother saying, Daddy's not going to make it. You have to get to Geneva right now. So I booked a flight from Paris to Geneva. I was there, but I don't know, 10, 12 or whatever it was. And then slept at the hospital with him, held his hand, and was able to be there when he transitioned. So my relationship with him, I feel like I made peace with him. I made peace with myself as well. And so it really did shift and change. Yeah.
I can see how important that is to you.
Yeah.
You
I
have,
think it's important for many people. The men and women that I work with, I don't think there's any way not to have, I don't know. Maybe there are people who have really unconflicted relationships with their parental units. But my experience and the people that I tend to work with have conflicted relationships with their parental units. It may not be overt, it may be more covert, but there is some disconnection in that relationship, which then gets mirrored in their own relationships, in their own romantic relationships, but also in their relationships with their coworkers and in their teams and in their, so it gets to get rippled out and mirrored out in different ways. And when one kind of closes the loop with that, then my experience has been is like there's less effort used. One doesn't have to shift and shape shift in one situation or in another relationship to meet the needs of the relationship. You just be you in all of them with your heart wide open. And that is so much less effort to be heart open in all the relationships that matter, rather than, oh, I'm going to open it just a bit here and close it over there and wide over here. And do you know what I'm saying? It's just, oh, but then there's always that, do I not? And then all the overprotective mechanisms. And so I found that it just makes it so much easier to just have my heart open.
it's beautiful. And as you say that, Joelle, it brought up several things in my mind. First of all, I remember reading somewhere this idea that our parents and our children are people we think we know so well, and frankly, we know them the least because we have these pictures of who they are. In the case of my children, for example, and you with your son, from like when they were little. Now they're much older, and it's hard for our relationship to shift without bringing a lot of awareness that they're not who they were that when they were 5. And the same thing with our parents. And it also brings up the idea to be of the psychological term transference, that when you go in with your therapist, but I see it with my clients. If someone had a bad relationship with their father around money, suddenly I'm in a meeting and I'm realizing like they're treating me like I'm their father. They're coming with the expectation that I'll be judging them, that they're a little girl that's doing something wrong. And it's very powerful that we bring the way we relate to other people into many of our relationships. It's a learned behavior and response, if you will. I see you shaking your head.
Yeah, I think for me, the biggest learning aspect of all of this was that moment in, as I said, I think it was 2018. I didn't keep track of the time when I said, you know what? Because actually my sister came over to visit recently and she said, what had you start to call mommy and daddy? And I said, you know what? I didn't want to die with regret. And it's the work that I do, and that was a really poignant moment for me, but it's a moment built on many other moments of taking personal and energetic responsibility for the part that I had played in the disconnection, reconnection, disconnection, that kind of like dynamic that we had co-created together to create a final, I'm going to stay with you until you die. I will be here when you die, to create that kind of an experience. But the important piece of this, and this speaks to the sort of like the foundational work that I do with my clients, is the acknowledgement and the need to take responsibility for what part you had in co-creating the relationship in the first place. Yes, they were your parent, but yes, they're also human. And yes, you're like 50 now or 60 or 70, and you're no longer their child. So at what point do you put on your big girl, big boy undies on and take personal and energetic responsibility for what you chose to co-create, not to blame, shame, or beat up on yourself, but to just say, you know what? Fact, I made this choice. Fact, it had this result. Not good. Fact, I did this. Fact, it had this outcome. Probably not the best outcome possible. So just going through and doing this, oh, what do they call it in the 12-step program? I can't think of the name, but where you take an inventory. It's like an inventory of what you've done. So there's this piece in the coaching and the work that I do about taking personal and energetic responsibility, which is part of the inventory. But then also beginning the process of, so if the way that you were operating does not work for you, and you're still under stress, your stress in a stress situation, still responding in that way, and it's not getting you the results that you want, then what we need to do is then to update the internal operating system so it's actually meeting the present need, not responding to a need that was present when you were 7 years old, let's say, or when you were 5 years old. So what do we need to do to retrain the nervous system? So it's the brain, heart, the brain, the heart, the belly, the whole system, to like actually meet what's emerging, not what you think, not what you expected, not all the past stuff, but actually meet it in the present moment, and therefore have a result and an outcome that is fruitful and generative for all involved.
And I hear in your voice how empowering that mind shift is and can be, because you're shifting from being a victim of a relationship that started many years ago and taking responsibility again, as you said, Joelle, not by blaming yourself, but by rising to the occasion, by coming into who you are. I think we all develop coping mechanisms when we're younger, and they work for us at a time. and they don't continue to work for us, but recognizing that we've chosen in some way those coping mechanisms and shedding them is what I hear your work with your clients is.
Yeah.
So, Joelle, can you say what your favorite part of your work is or your favorite people to work with?
Oh my gosh, that's such a
Your
hard.
ideal client, as they say.
Okay, so my newest favorite person. No. So it depends. I'm going to give you context, right? So this weekend I did a couples retreat
Oh, love it.
where I brought couples forward together, and they each had a single canvas that they were going to work with. And this canvas was meant to be a representation of what I like to call, and what I've referred to in the book as, the sacred third, which is the soul of their relationship. So we looked at all the aspects of the relationship that need pruning back. I use a lot of sort of plant language, but all the things that need to be pruned back, and what your vision is for the relationship. And then they co-created a painting together that required zero artistic talent, by the way. I'm all about, it's very low touch, high sensitivity. So very little technique. So that was such a fun thing to do, to see couples who'd been married for 20 years, and like how they enjoyed spending the entire day together, creating a canvas together, or the ones who had been only together for 6 years, right? There's a little level of maturity of a couple that's been together 20 compared to somebody who's been together 6. And they're just, you can even, it's tangibly visible on the canvas, right? I love working with couples. I also have a 3-day retreat that I do in the summertime up in Lake George in July. And this is just for women. But we do similar work, but we take relationship to the canvas. Because what usually happens is that however you deal with stress will show up on the canvas. Like, so if you're like, oh, I can't say the wrong thing. I can't do it imperfectly. I got to really think about it before I take action, or, oh, forget about it. I'm just going to go in there and, or, oh, this sucks, and I'm going to toss the canvas across the room. So all of the stuff shows up in a canvas. So I love working with those women because it creates like this amazing community of women who are looking to have more awareness of how their relational issues are coming forward in a safe space. One of my mentors, Shiloh Sophia, says art is the most dangerous thing that you could do without dying. Right? Because it feels like you're dying. Oh my God, if I make a mistake.
For women, we're such perfectionists.
Oh my gosh, yes, absolutely. So I love working with that community of women. And then I also like working one-on-one with my clients. I just had a client, you mentioned earlier, that you noticed that I shifted out of a victim space into a more empowered space. And I had a recent conversation with a client of mine. We've been working. So I work with clients a minimum of 12 months. That's like the smallest amount. They usually stay with me between 3 to 5 years. And the reason for that is because I work with women who are primarily in their 50s and 60s, some in their 40s. But if you've been doing something for about 30, 40, 50, 60 years, it's going to take some practice to do it differently before it becomes a new normal, right? I imagine that the same is true with your work, Laura, right? That the practice of doing money differently is not something that just happens overnight. It has to be a practice. You have to be practicing doing things differently before it clicks in as I'm doing this way now. This is just how it is. So I was speaking with this one client, Diane, who had met somebody while we were coaching together, and then it didn't work out, and her heart got just blown out of the water. She was just devastated. So she and I, in our coaching, I hung with her through that whole very devastating space to get to our last call. And she said, Joelle, I realized that when I met this gentleman, I was hoping he would choose me. I was hoping, and I had this image of her. I'm like, it was kind of like an Oliver, like, and he's holding out the bowl, right? Please, sir, may I have some more? Like, she had that attitude of, I've got to get chosen. I've got to be good enough for him to choose me. And then now she's describing her dating, and no, I have a criteria they have to match. I'm like, Ooh, welcome to the men's project, right? So she's now engaged in her own men's project from a more sort of, oh, I'm the catch. I'm the catch. I get to choose, not from an entitled place, but from a what's going to make my heart happy? Who is going to be the one that I will choose to live with me until we're sitting on our rocking chairs, until we decide to shuffle off this mortal coil? So I love working with those clients as well. So to ask me who I like to, just like I gave you all over them, I'm all over the map. I love to work with them all.
But you did describe a certain age group that
Yes.
you tend to work with people around 50, give or take. So that is something, and clearly people dealing with relationship issues.
Yeah, they tend to be really smart and savvy. They also tend to be kind of like CEOs, professionals, like very high end, like they're very responsible for people and things and systems and stuff. And so the skill set that it took to get them to where they're at is actually working against them to get the relationships that they want, because they had to hustle to get to where they are, and they had to push and shove and do whatever they needed to do. But in relationship, you have to learn to surrender,
Ah, great word.
and you have to learn to receive. And so the women that I tend to work with, and the men as well, tend to be movers and shakers, but haven't, like, they're still like, I'm the one who's going to make this thing happen. And what's really needed is a reversal of that, of, oh, I actually have to ask for what I want and then lean back and hope and receive it.
Mm.
So there's that kind of that I don't have to be doing, I have to be more of this stance. And so the skill set needed to go from I'm going to put my hands in everything to I'm going to let go is something. So yeah, very kind of like high end, very movers and shakers who just need a different skill set that they've accustomed themselves to having to get themselves in the positions that they are. It's not that they're going to give that piece up, but they just need a different skill set to be in the relationships that they want from a open heart.
Which strikes me as someone who is a pusher and a mover and a shaker as something very difficult to do. Like it in me, as you describe it, it brings up this feeling of this emotion of fear, right?
Yeah.
Like because you have to trust in order to open your heart and surrender. And as you described in your own journey, many of us come from a place where it's not so easy to trust. So,
Well, and that's really key. Everyone is looking for to be seen, to
yeah.
be heard, to be understood, to be held. And we want intimacy with another human, connection with another human being. The currency for that is not, I'm going to handle and manipulate and do all the things to make it happen, because then it just won't. The currency for that to happen is vulnerability.
Yes.
And so this is why clients stay with me 3-5 years, because to release that fear and to begin to trust, and that opening up the heart and keeping it open is a safe thing to do, takes practice. And it also takes a container
Yes.
and accountability. And yeah, that's the biggest piece, because everyone says they want transformation, but nobody wants to really change,
Yes.
get there. But when working with me, you get to step into a dojo. It's almost like martial arts, but we get to practice katas over and over again to soften your resistance to dropping that protective, all those protective mechanisms. And then both the men and the women that I work with, like all of a sudden, like they become all of a sudden really intuitive, and they follow these guidances and these synchronicities these start to happen. And I think of my friend, one of my clients, Margaret, who, when she worked with me, she was dating a whole bunch of people who were just not a good fit. And part of my coaching, I said to her, use as you choose, but I'm going to make a recommendation that you don't date this person anymore and that you be done with him. And my coaching recommendation is that you stop dating altogether and you start going out with your girlfriends. Have fun, enjoy your life, discover what brings you joy, kind of like a Marie Kondo, very Mama Gina approach to the whole thing. And as it turned out, she decided to start going out with lots of girlfriends, and she went to a charity event. And it was at this charity event that she ended up meeting the lid, what she calls a lid to her pot. They're engaged to be married. And so that's like how the whole thing transpires once you're with it, and you get to practice opening up your heart and releasing the fear and surrendering to receive the love that you want, the intimacy that you want, and trust that you can be seen, heard, held, understood, and intimate with another human being, and that you won't self-implode, the world won't fall apart, and you will be safe. That's the biggest lesson of all.
Beautiful. So we're coming to the end of our conversation, Joelle. I'm wondering, I do to ask the question, how has your definition of success shifted over time, and particularly perhaps financial success?
My definition of success used to be a very socialized definition. It looks like six figures. It looks like blah, 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 all the definitions that you'll see on social media.
Right.
That's really shifted for me. Success for me is how many of my clients graduate, meaning no longer need me, are off on their own in a relationship that they never expected, but is the perfect match for them, where they're like living their life in their happiest, in the most happiest way possible. So for me, it's not necessarily a financial piece. It's more of an energetic quality. I'm not saying money's not important, and I'm not dismissing that component, but they actually go hand in hand for me. That when I'm aligned and I'm doing the best service and I'm really providing the best service and the highest support to my clients, it comes back to me financially. It comes back to me energetically, but that is not my motivational value. So that for me is what success looks like. When my clients are out in the world moving and shaking, and they talk about the work that I do and they send me clients, that to me is success.
Thank you. And Joelle, I can't step away from the question, what role your art, whenever I see you, there's a beautiful painting behind you, and I know that art is a big part of your life. You spoke about it a little bit, but what role does your art play both in your work and perhaps in your definition of feeling that you are living a successful life?
Like art as life, right? I think back to that first time that I heard about the life coach, and I had that whoa feeling. Oh, I've got to pursue this. I don't know why, and I don't know how, and I don't know. It makes no sense, but I'm just going to follow. That's how art is for me. And that's how my business has grown. Like, I'm just going to follow the next thing and the next thing and the next thread, and it gets to be woven together, and it becomes this beautiful tapestry. And then before I know it, I've got something beautiful that I've created and other people benefit from.
Yes.
And appreciate and love.
Yes, reminding me of, again, something someone said that, but you just said life is art. We imagine that life is following, you do this piece, it's like pieces of a puzzle, but it really is more of a painting.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's also that surrender that we talked about earlier, right? Because if I was like, oh, it needs to look this way and that way, and I'm the one controlling it, it's never going to get to where my heart really is leading me to go. But if I really let my heart guide me, then it ends up being the exact painting I need it to be.
Love it. Joelle, is there anything you want to make sure you say to our listeners? Any resources you want to share, or any thought before we say goodbye?
I have this 3-day retreat coming up in July 18th through 20th. So if you sense at all you'd like to play with me up in Lake George, New York, which is in the beginning of the Adirondack Mountains, which is really a beautiful place. I'm doing a 3-day retreat called The Art of Relating, Pathways to Expression. And it's an opportunity to play with the canvas in your relationships in a community of other like-minded women at a place called Weowaka Center for Women. It's actually the oldest running women's center in the United States. Georgia O'Keeffe used to spend her summers there. So to be painting in the same location where she was painting is exciting and fun to do. Yeah, you can go to my website, joellelydon.com /art of relating.
I will put that in the show notes.
Beautiful. So, yes, if you're interested in playing with a bunch of girlfriends, hanging out on Lake George with some paint and other women,
Right.
that's it.
Thank you so much for your time, Joelle. It was such a nice conversation.
My absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for the opportunity to connect today, Laura.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thanks for listening to Making Change with Your Money. Certified financial planner Laura Rotter specializes in helping people just like you organize, clarify, and invest their money in order to support a life of purpose and meaning. Go to www.trueabundanceadvisors.com /workbook for a free resource to help you on your journey. Disclaimer, please remember that the information shared by this podcast does not constitute accounting, legal, tax, investment, or financial advice. It's for information purposes only. You should seek appropriate professional advice for your specific information.